All right, now let's look at changing tenths to hundredths. So we learned last week about equivalent fractions, and that's really what we're doing now. So taking a look at what I've written or what I have drawn here, if I was to say, okay, what is the fraction that's shaded? Well, we would look at it and we would count by tens, so 10, 20, 30, 40. So right now, I want it to be smaller. So right now we have 40 hundredths. That's what's shaded. And if we wanted to write that into a fraction, there's no holes shaded. 40 hundredths. We read both of these the same. So the fraction we'd read is 40 hundredths, and the decimal is also 40 hundredths. However, I can make an equivalent fraction of 40 hundredths. When I look at this, if I was to change this hundredths grid, I could change it just like this. So I could actually make these into tenths just by drawing over. So I'm drawing over with yellow, and I am making 10 equal parts. Instead of the 100 equal parts that I originally had, I now have 10. So if I was to say, okay, which part is shaded, we would look at this and we would count 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 out of 10 parts are shaded, which we know is equivalent as 40 hundredths. So this is just a little recap of what we learned last week. Now, I can also make this into an equivalent fraction or equivalent decimal, right? So if before I had 40 hundredths, now I'm reading this fraction as 4 tenths. Think about how I would write that as a decimal. 4 tenths. So I need to make sure that the 4 is in the tenths, but I don't need to add any other number, because if I was to just read this, I would read that decimal as 4 tenths. Well, I can see that 4 tenths is equivalent to 40 hundredths. Now, how I ended up with my 40 hundredths here is by putting a 0 in the hundredths place value. That's how I would then read it as 40 hundredths. There's 40 if I took away this yellow, but I think if I take the yellow away, it's going to take away, ooh, dangerous. Okay, that's the only thing about this. Okay, so if I took the yellow away, so it's no longer out of tenths, it's now at hundredths, you can see that there are 40 squares shaded. But just by going back over, I can change this into tenths. And I can see that this is equivalent to 4 tenths. So in your Jump Math assignment on page NS5-81 and 82, this is where you are going to practice this skill of changing them from tenths to hundredths and finding the equivalents of them, but also then incorporating using decimals. Now, I highly recommend that at the top of NS5-82, there's an example. Take a look at that example. I have walked you through it, but if you have any questions, just reach out for your teachers. Have a great day.